Good day, everybody. Welcome back to another session of the Being Whole series, where we will discuss topics linked to the health of the physical body, spirit, and soul of a human being. We would also like to welcome those who watch us for the first time now. The purpose of the series is to assist people to desire and manage to live on earth as whole human beings. Your hosts for the Being Whole series are myself, Helena, and my husband, Gerard. We are from Your Friend in Need Health. We specialize in natural health products. We do live and dry blood analysis, and also Christian counseling and coaching, and some other related services. Together with us in the studio, we also have Skalk van Rooyen with us. He is a life sciences expert. He explained earlier on what that means, so you might find it in an earlier video. Or you can just mention it quickly again, because he's the one that's going to give us the most information for this session about the complexity of a human being from a cell biology viewpoint. We would also like to thank the media team, My Media Innovations, that is supporting us with the series. Without them, it would have been difficult to start with the series. Skalk, maybe you should use the time now, just in short, to quickly say again to the people who's watching now for the first time, what does life sciences mean?
Well, basically, the study or life sciences as a whole group basically explains biology and all of its related subjects. So you would have biotechnology, maybe bioscience, biochemistry. It's largely dealing with biology and the study of life or things that give life. So that's basically what's grouped into life sciences.
And it's much more than the biology we did at school.
Yes, there's a lot going on.
It sounds very interesting to me. Okay, Skalk, we have an image of the human cell, and I'm going to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
So that you should please answer. Skalk, what is a cell in the human body?
So a cell is really the basic building block of the body. It's the smallest unit. Many cells are grouped together into tissues, and larger groupings is grouped into organs. So the cell is really the smallest living unit inside the human body. And that is basically where the whole process of life and the exchange between that and the environment happens.
Yeah, for those who didn't see it, in a previous session, we discussed the development of a new human being in the womb of his or her mother. And there we also spoke about the cell, and we spoke about a fertilized cell there. So is this cell different from that you're talking about now? Are we talking about a different kind of or a more general cell? Can you please help me there?
Well, a cell is really a cell. All the cells in the human body have the DNA to become anything, but they were programmed earlier on to become a certain part of the body. But all the cells in the body have the genetic material that the other cells have. So when we speak about a cell, it basically describes any kind of cell you can think of. Some of them, like I say, have become specialized. So they became a brain cell or a different type of cell. But when we look at the cell and the basic machinery that goes on inside the cell, that's the same throughout the body.
Would you then say a cell is simple, or is it complicated if you look at one cell specifically?
Well, surely if you look at a picture of the cell and you just look at the cell isolated, it looks simple. But it is definitely not simple. It is very complex. There are many study areas that's dedicated to the study of just what goes on inside one cell.
Sure.
There are courses that, even one of the courses I did in my studies is cell biology. So it's the biology of the cell. And there are so many things going on inside the cell that you realize that this is not the kind of complexity that can just happen by chance.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly move back to the image. Is that what the course was about? Is this a summary of cell biology, or
Yeah, that's the basic structure of a cell that they show there. You get your various different components inside the cell. All of our body cells have got the nucleus. The human cell has the nucleus where the genetic material is contained. In and around that, there's many different structures. You have your endoplasmic reticulum, you've got your ribosomes, and they are very important. You got your mitochondria. The ribosomes are involved in protein synthesis that gets a signal from inside the nucleus to make a certain protein. Your mitochondria respond to food from outside, and they break down that food in a stepwise process to produce energy. So that's really what goes on inside the cell. But once we start going into the cell and its machinery, we start realizing how complex it is. There are millions of things going on. And that is basically what would be referred to in the next question, if I can just switch into that already.
What goes on inside the cell?
Yes.
So there are different parts with different functions, and there's communication.
Yes.
But what exactly is going on in that cell?
Well, the main thing that, like you say, there are different components and parts in the cell, and there is definite communication. And this communication is in a chemical way. Most of these messengers that goes on inside the cell, it's a response that the cell has to nutrients from outside. A specific nutrient would bind to a receptor on the cell surface. Now that receptor is usually got a specific shape, and that food molecule comes and binds right on top of it. And that binding has a specific reaction that happens inside the cell. That binding causes a stepwise cellular signaling pathway to be switched on. And that is necessary, so it needs to tell the nucleus inside the cell what's happening on the outside, and that there was this nutrient that has this cell signaling pathway being switched on, and that switches on a specific gene inside the nucleus, which then responds by making a piece of what they call mRNA that goes out of the nucleus into the cell, and in there, in the ribosome, it makes a specific protein. And that message was all conveyed by the specific nutrient that bound to the receptor, and that had a specific cell signaling pathway that was switched on, which switched on the DNA to give a certain message to the RNA to make a certain protein. And that protein is then the basis of life, how the cell functions.
So would you say the nutrient triggered this whole thing?
Yes.
And it's really required, so you can't go without nutrients.
No, it is
needs
a requirement.
To trigger certain processes in your cell. So if you, for instance, have a nutrient deficient diet, you will feel the effect because your cells will suffer. Nothing is telling them to start with their process.
And those cell messaging pathways that's going on inside the cell, there are many of them, and it's actually, it's not shown in pictures like that. If you need a much larger, stronger microscope to show that.
Okay.
And they've seen that these cell messaging pathways interact with each other as well. So one pathway being switched on might tell the other pathway, okay, don't switch on now. And sometimes it happens that one pathway switches on 2 or 3 other pathways.
So it's highly complicated, actually.
It's very complicated. And the other thing that they found is that they were mapping the human genome, the human DNA, and they always figured, but we humans are so complex, we're probably going to have 100,000 genes. And then they mapped it, and they saw we actually have less genes than some plants. So then they saw that, wow, that seems like there's a lot of junk DNA, because we've got a lot of genetic material. We just don't have that many genes that codes for certain things. But then they saw that what they thought was junk DNA is actually control regions, so that we have many more ways to control our genes than a plant would have, or lower animals might have. They might have 2 or 3 ways of controlling their genes. We might have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 ways of controlling one gene, which is very much driven by nutrition. And that opened up a field that they're speaking of now, nutrigenomics, which is the control of our genomics, our genetic material, by the nutrients that we take in. So that even if you inherited a bad gene from your parents for cholesterol maybe, or for breast cancer, you can change the outcome by your nutrition, because the nutrition makes that certain parts of that bad gene that you inherited is switched off if you eat the right nutrients. Because that one gene that controls the breast cancer process is actually, it's got many promoter regions on its edges. So it's got 7 or 8 or 9, 10 different ways of being expressed. by the nutrients that we eat. So that really shows how complex cell biology is, that one little single cell we look at, it looks so simple, but it's not simple at all.
Yeah, I think Gerard would like to say something about what you actually inherited.
It's very interesting to see. I mean, many people are test and interact with. They're saying that they've inherited this and that from the genes. I say, listen, and then I answer them in this way. I say, primarily, you've inherited one big thing, and that's the eating habits.
Yes.
And because your nutrition is actually affecting most of what is happening in your body. And it just actually confirms what you've said, that yes, the genes are maybe switched on because of the nutrition, but once you take your own nutrition, you determine whether that thing switches on or off.
Yes, you can determine it in a large way, because those receptors that I mentioned earlier on the cell surface react to a certain molecule in that food that you're eating, and that molecule was made specifically for that receptor. It binds to it like a lock in a key, and it's specific. So you need, and you can get other molecules that is synthesized by some industries, that it's a synthetic molecule that looks like the one that's in the natural food, but it's not exactly the same.
Yes.
It's the same, but there are many other processes involved. There are invisible processes that's referred to as, basically, you can look at it as quantum mechanics. The energetics of that natural molecule is such that it binds in a favorable way to the receptor. The synthetic molecule is exactly the same as the one that you eat, but the difference is the energetics is different. The way in which that molecule sits in three-dimensional space is different,
and the impact is different.
And we cannot create that. So that again alludes to the perfect creation.
That you cannot duplicate it.
That molecule in the natural apple that you're eating, even if you synthesize that same molecule in the lab, it can never be the same, because the energetics is different. The way that molecule in the apple, that molecule that you take in actually rotates in space. And that three-dimensional structure fits specifically on that receptor. The synthetic molecule that you make, it looks the same, but it doesn't act the same energetically.
So
the quantum mechanics is different.
So even the nutrients were made for us.
They were made for us, and they've got specific
an exact match. Yes. It's sweet.
and actually, the most powerful atom on Earth is the most simple one, hydrogen. And hydrogen drives all these processes. The hydrogen, the way it binds to your cells, it is, once one goes into that subject, it's amazing to see that a simple little molecule like hydrogen drives all these processes.
Okay, now, so based on what we've discussed just now and some other things you may add, could the Big Bang Theory speak to the origin of cellular complexity?
Not at all.
Is there a way?
No, there's no way. There's no way, because there would have been much more randomness if it was because of an explosion. An explosion causes a lot of randomness.
And will an explosion repeat things like we've discussed the development of a new human being? Will it repeat the pregnancy process in exactly the same way in different females?
No, it won't. The process won't stay the same, because if I drop a bomb in this studio right now, it's going to rip the walls in a certain way. If I now rebuild it and the same bomb explodes the next day, it's going to rip it in a slightly different way.
Something interesting, you have to rebuild it. It didn't develop into something. You caused destruction.
You actually caused
chaos. Caused destruction and randomness and chaos. So the ordered way in which our cells act and react cannot be explained by a simple theory like a Big Bang Theory.
And cannot be repeated.
It cannot be repeated, and the molecules, it just won't happen in the same way.
Okay, we will mention it again later, but just with the humanoids that they're developing these days, I've seen a few of them. They look exactly like human beings, and maybe they're not where they want to be, but they're not even trying to recreate cells. They do it mechanically, but from the outside, you may not be able to see the difference.
Yes, because like I said, that explained about the energetics of molecules. We cannot create that.
Yes, and there's life in it. It's not
life.
a machine.
The way that hydrogen reacts in the living system, we cannot recreate that.
Thank you very much for that, Skalk. That was now very interesting. It's amazing what you find in a cell and what it can do.
Yes,
and thank you for that. And thank you all for joining us. Please join us again with our next talk. And the next talk is going to be is all control of a human being of a physical nature. We spend some time on the physical side of the human being. Please subscribe and leave your comments below, and be blessed until then. Thank you.